Hey everyone, it's Alexander the Real Mr. Robinson. Welcome to the channel. This is my review for the fourth film in the Friday the 13th series, Friday the 13th, the final chapter. Oh, what a lie of a title that is. So anyway, this is the fourth film in the Friday the 13th series, released in 1984, which means that there was no movie released in 1983. But surprisingly, or maybe not since the last one did it, it picks up one day after the original. Jason's body is removed from the farm, taken to a hospital, but surprise, surprise, Jason's not dead. He wakes up, starts killing people, and heads back to Crystal Lake, where we are joined by the Jarvis family, who owns this little log house in the middle of the woods, and they live right across from another house that a group of college students just rented out. And it's a Friday the 13th movie, so you know it won't be too long before Jason starts killing off these characters one after another. So even though we like to laugh about the subtitle of this movie, the final chapter, there really was a point to try to end it right here, because Paramount was really frustrated with these movies, because even though they were making a lot of money for Paramount and they cost nothing to make, Paramount really did not like their name being dragged through the mud with this series. So the film's producer, Frank Mancuso Jr., who was actually the son of the CEO of Paramount at the time, thought of the idea to just end the series here with the death of Jason Voorhees, and then they could just be done with it. Obviously, that didn't work out because there are 8 more movies that came out afterwards, including a crossover with the Nightmare on Elm Street series, which started this same year. But for what it's worth, I think out of all the movies I've reviewed so far, this is the best one. Before I get ahead of myself, this movie really is nothing that special to begin with. It has the same structure of the last few movies. It's a little more polished, I think, than the first 3. It has a little more of a budget, but not by that much. And it even shares the same idea that the third one had, where it focuses on not a bunch of camp counselors, but just kids renting a house by the lake. But that's not to say that there aren't any good things in this movie. For one, this is the return of Tom Savini, who has not been with the franchise since the first movie. And when you watch the kills in this movie compared to the ones in the last movie, you can clearly tell that Tom Savini's hands were on this movie, because the kills here are really cool, they're really brutal, and probably my favorite is the kill where Crispin Glover gets a cleaver slammed in his face and he does that little head twitch. And also all the prosthetics, whether it's a fake head or a fake naked body, look more convincing than the last movie. Like, in the last movie, I complained about the scene where they rip off the Kevin Bacon murder, and it's just so bloodless, and the body looks fake. This time around, everything looks pretty convincing, and that definitely amps this movie up to make it a lot better. The acting in this movie is surprisingly better than the last 3, which you don't go to these movies to watch acting, but I have to give credit where credit is due, mainly because the characters are a little more memorable this time around. First off, you have Crispin Glover, who a year later would go on to star in my favorite movie of all time, Back to the Future, and his character in this movie is very insecure about himself, he's very shy, he's pretty much an introvert, and there's a part of me that kind of relates to him, where I watch him and go, I'm rooting for you, man. Like, you have a few temper tantrums you need to work out, but yeah, you're the one guy in this movie that I'm rooting for. And it's a damn shame that he gets killed in this movie, but again, he has probably my favorite kill of the movie. And then you have Corey Feldman playing the most famous Friday the 13th character besides Jason himself, Tommy Jarvis. And it's actually refreshing to see a kid be one of the main characters of a slasher movie. Not talking about a teenager, I'm talking about a preteen. And Corey Feldman is really good with what he's given, although you do kind of have to question how a kid living in the middle of the woods with his mom and his sister is able to build all these movie-worthy special effects and animatronics. Like, how do you even get the material for that? That's something I would really like to know. And then the last person I think is worth mentioning is Ted White, who plays Jason. Ted White was a stunt actor who is still alive today, but he's had a long career since the late 40s, and even was a stunt double for the Gill Man in Creature from the Black Lagoon. And as Jason Voorhees, he's really good because Jason takes a ton of punishment in this movie. Whether he's busting through walls, busting through windows, he shows a true amount of dedication to into this role. There's even a scene where the final girl smashes a TV onto Jason's head. And it just goes to show you that Jason Voorhees is a role, much more than Michael Myers, I think, that requires a lot of physical stamina. And Ted White definitely delivers. But even then, he's not the most famous actor to play Jason, and there would be an actor later down the line who would top him in terms of taking abuse, but we'll get to that actor much later. There are some problems with this movie, of course. I mean, it's a slight improvement over the first 3 films, but if you've been marathoning these movies, by the time you get to the final chapter, it feels like you've seen all of it before. And you have. It's done better than the last 3 movies, but it just doesn't really offer that much in terms of a surprise. And the one thing that I noticed when watching this movie that irritated me was how reserved Jason actually was. This is the 4th Friday the 13th movie, the 3rd one featuring Jason Voorhees, and the 2nd to where he actually has his iconic look with the hockey mask. And it's not until the 3rd act of the film where you really get to see Jason in his full glory. The rest of the movie plays out like the other movies, where it's POV shots, it shows Jason's hands, his feet. Jason doesn't really have a lot of screen time, and it's perplexing since they already established what Jason looks like. We know he's the killer this 3rd time around. Just show Jason. Don't be shy about hiding him. So I thought that was a really weird decision to make. And speaking of weird decisions, there's some weird moments throughout this movie that I don't know whether to categorize them as good or bad. For one, there's every scene with the coroner, who is the first victim in this film. And the coroner is just a weird character, because the first time we see him, the officers that bring Jason's body into the hospital ask him if this is the last body he's taking care of. And the coroner says, "Oh no, there's one more body over there. Real cute girl. Was. Well, she still is, so yeah, that's kind of creepy." Then there's the moment where he's watching this very weird aerobic video, and it's on mute the whole time, and you're just wondering, what is that? Like, what kind of video is that? And who watches that in a hospital? And then there's a moment in this movie where he's making out with a nurse. They're about to get undressed, and they're right next to the corpse of Jason Voorhees, before Jason's hand just drops and scares the nurse. And the coroner just delivers probably my favorite line of dialogue in this movie, where he freaks out. "Jesus Christmas! Holy Jesus goddamn! Holy Jesus Christmas shit!" It comes out of nowhere, and it's so ridiculous in terms of his delivery and overacting. It's really weird. Again, I don't know whether to categorize it as good or bad, because it's just weird. And speaking of that aerobics video, that's something that I've heard about for the longest time before seeing this movie. And what I think is even weirder is the stag film that our characters find in the cabin and just start watching. And that's something I've never heard of until I actually saw the movie. And for those of you that don't know what a stag film is, pretty much it's silent movie porn. Yeah, it's really weird. And that's a moment in the movie that I'm like, wait, you guys are focused on the weird aerobics video, but you don't want to talk about this nonsense right here? And then the last 2 moments of the movie that I have to mention because of how hilarious they are 2 death scenes. The first one involves a girl who goes out skinny dipping in the middle of the lake, lies on a raft, and then Jason just pops out of the water and stabs her through the raft. And the scream that she makes, combined with her facial expressions as she's being stabbed, is hilarious. You have to watch the movie, or at least have to watch that scene to really get the full impact of how hilarious it is. And then the last one is when a hiker, who ends up being Tommy Jarvis's sister's love interest, boy, that's a mouthful, gets killed by Jason Voorhees in the basement. And I mean, there's no other way to say it. As Jason is stabbing this guy, he's going, "Oh my god, he's killing me! He's killing me! Oh my god, run! Run!" That moment, more than the skinny dipping raft death, I laughed out loud, just because who announces that a guy's killing them? Like, that is comedy to the nth degree. But again, it kind of plays into the problem I have with these movies so far, is that, are you guys trying to be comedic, or are you guys trying to actually scare us? Because if you're trying to scare us, you're not doing it successfully. So at the end of the day, the final chapter is just okay. It's got some really good kills. The Tom Savini special effects are fantastic. It has a few likable characters this time around. It introduced us to the second most popular character of the franchise, but at the same time it has that been there, done that feeling. There's some questionable moments throughout. I'm still really confused on why they decided to keep Jason hidden throughout most of the movie. And as for Jason's death, it confuses me why in the third movie he got an axe to his face, leaving his mask with that iconic mark, but in this movie it's just a machete in the face. Doesn't really seem all that creative considering that he got taken out by kind of the same way in the last movie. But then again, sliding down the machete and Tommy Jarvis just whacking him to death with that machete definitely sells the fact that Jason really did die. So I don't know, jury's still out on my personal feelings on his death in this movie. His death, I should say. But I'd say watch at your own risk. When I say watch at your own risk for this movie, that's more on the enthusiastic end. It's a lot better than the first three movies, but it's not all that special. In fact, with the second, third, and fourth Friday the 13th movies, there have always been a much better slasher movie that came out at the time, or horror movie in general. With Friday the 13th Part 2 in 1981, there was Halloween 2, which is a better movie in my opinion. In 1982, the third Friday the 13th movie was eclipsed by the third Halloween movie, which of course has gotten some love over the years as an underappreciated horror movie. And then, as I mentioned beforehand, 1984 not only marked the death of Jason Voorhees for now, but it marked the birth of Freddy Krueger and the Nightmare on Elm Street films. So yeah, this is not the best horror movie that you could have seen in 1984, but it's not terrible. It's okay. And there you go. That's my review for Friday the 13th, the final chapter. And as I said before, it's not the final chapter, because next time we're going to be talking about the fifth movie in the series, Friday the 13th, A New Beginning, which horror fans have proclaimed is one of, if not the worst films in the series. So God help me, because I've not seen this movie before, and I'm a little nervous. If I didn't like Part 3, then I'm terrified at how bad this movie could be. But before we get to that, I want to know what you guys think about the final chapter. If you've seen it, what did you think? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, I hope you enjoyed this review. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, leave a comment, support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until then, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there is only one.